It's known as the Black Dahlia case. The killing of 22-year-old Elizabeth Short is one of the most gripping unsolved mysteries in American history. It's back in the spotlight.
For nearly 8 decades, the Black Dahlia case has stood as one of the most chilling unsolved mysteries in American history, haunting investigators and captivating the public. The brutal 1947 murder of Elizabeth Short seemed destined to remain forever shrouded in darkness. But now, a breakthrough is shaking everything we thought we knew. Hidden clues, overlooked evidence, and critical details missed in plain sight are finally coming together. So, could this be the answer that eluded detectives for generations? And what shocking truth has been hiding all along? Mystery hidden plainly. For almost 80 years, the murder of Elizabeth Short, widely remembered as the Black Dahlia, has been described as one of the greatest mysteries in American history. Detectives, journalists, writers, and ordinary people have spent decades trying to uncover the truth behind the shocking crime. The case became so famous that many eventually believed it was too complicated to ever solve. But the deeper people look into the evidence, the more unsettling the reality appears to be. What if the mystery was never truly impossible? What if the truth had been close from the very beginning, buried beneath confusion, mistakes, and failures? When investigators first began working on the case, they were not completely lost. In fact, they had several important clues that could have changed everything. There were reports that Elizabeth may have tried to seek help before her death. There were suspicious individuals connected to the investigation, including a doctor with disturbing knowledge of surgery and anatomy. Authorities reportedly gathered secret recordings, interviewed witnesses, collected letters, and examined physical evidence connected to possible suspects. Yet, despite all these leads, the investigation slowly fell apart. Pressure from the public and the media created chaos. Newspapers competed for shocking headlines instead of protecting the case. Important details leaked everywhere. Investigators struggled to organize evidence properly. Some reports disappeared into forgotten archives. Certain pieces of evidence were contaminated or lost. Witnesses became harder to find as years passed. Eventually, many people simply gave up hope of ever finding the killer. One man, George Hodell, attracted serious attention during the investigation.
The third and final suspect is well known to even those only casually familiar with the case, Dr. George Hodell. Many who worked on the case over the years believe they interacted with the real killer at some point.
Detectives reportedly watched him closely and even recorded conversations connected to him. But before anything could fully develop, he left the United States and disappeared from the center of the investigation. Over time, interest faded, files were buried, and the case drifted into history without answers. Yet the tragedy behind the case is often forgotten. The nickname Black Dahlia turned Elizabeth Short into something almost unreal, as if she were only part of a dark Hollywood legend. But she was not just a mystery for newspapers and crime books. She was a real young woman with fears, struggles, and dreams. She hoped for a better future in Hollywood. She experienced abandonment and hardship. Like many young people arriving in a big city, she was searching for opportunity, safety, and belonging. Some believe she may even have sensed danger shortly before her death and tried to reach out for help. That heartbreaking possibility still troubles people today. Because if modern discoveries and theories are correct, then the Black Dahlia case represents more than an unsolved crime. It represents a massive failure by powerful institutions, a failure by investigators to connect crucial evidence, a failure by the media to handle the case responsibly, a failure by a system that allowed a possible killer to slip away unnoticed. Elizabeth Short's killer is likely gone forever now. Traditional justice may never come. But many believe the truth still exists, hidden inside old police files, forgotten witness statements, sealed archives, and neglected records waiting to be uncovered. The case continues to fascinate the world because it raises a chilling question. What if the truth was never truly hidden? What if it had been sitting in plain sight all along, while the people responsible simply failed to recognize it? Let's delve into the details of the new evidence emerging decades later. Reopened cold case mysteries. The Black Dahlia case seemed buried beneath time, lost evidence, and countless dead ends. But recently, a series of shocking discoveries has forced people to look at the case again with fresh fear and curiosity. What makes these new developments so unsettling is not just the evidence itself, but what it may reveal about the final days of Elizabeth Short's life. One of the most disturbing discoveries involves a long-forgotten police encounter report that reportedly resurfaced years later. According to researchers, an officer from the Los Angeles Police Department may have spoken with Elizabeth shortly before her murder. The report allegedly describes a young woman who appeared frightened, emotionally shaken, and desperate for safety. If the report is genuine, it changes the entire emotional picture of the case. It suggests Elizabeth may have sensed danger closing in around her. She may have known someone was following or threatening her. Even more chilling is the possibility that she tried to seek help before it was too late. The thought that she may have reached out in fear, only for nothing to happen afterward, adds a heartbreaking layer to an already tragic story. Then came another discovery that pushed the mystery even deeper. A letter, believed to have been written in 1949, reportedly surfaced decades later among the belongings of a deceased family member. The writer claimed to be a police informant and pointed directly to someone identified only as G.H. as Elizabeth Short's killer. Many researchers believe those initials referred to George Hodell, one of the most controversial suspects ever linked to the Black Dahlia case. What truly alarmed investigators and researchers was the claim that the letter included details about the murder that had never been released publicly. Although experts still debate whether the letter is authentic, its existence has reopened troubling questions. Could important evidence have been forgotten for decades? Were clues hidden away in dusty attics, abandoned storage boxes, or old police files that nobody bothered to examine closely? The possibility is both fascinating and terrifying. But perhaps the strangest twist came many years later. In 2026, an amateur codebreaker claimed to have used artificial intelligence technology to decode one of the infamous Zodiac killer ciphers from the late 1960s. According to the alleged decoding, the message revealed the name Marvin Margolis. That name immediately caught attention because Margolis had once appeared on the LAPD's original list of Black Dahlia suspects. Reports claimed he briefly dated Elizabeth Short before her death. Back in 1947, police questioned Margolis and eventually dismissed him as a suspect. But now, decades later, his name suddenly resurfaced in connection with another infamous serial killer mystery. Many experts remain doubtful about the accuracy of the cipher decoding, and some believe it could simply be coincidence. But how and where was the mystery birthed? What happened on that day? Let's dive into the details of the morning Los Angeles discovered a nightmare. A chilling discovery. On the cold morning of January 15, 1947, the city of Los Angeles seemed completely normal. The sun slowly rose over the streets, cars moved through quiet neighborhoods, and families prepared for another ordinary Wednesday. Parents were getting children ready for school. Shop owners unlocked their doors. Workers hurried through their morning routines without the slightest idea that history was about to witness one of the darkest and most disturbing crimes America would ever know. In the peaceful neighborhood of Leimert Park, near South Norton Avenue and West 39th Street, an empty piece of land sat unnoticed among growing homes and busy streets. Nothing about the vacant lot seemed unusual, but hidden there was a horrifying secret waiting to be uncovered. That morning, a young mother named Betty Bersinger was walking along the street with her small daughter. As they passed the overgrown lot, something strange caught her attention in the weeds nearby. Lying on the ground was what appeared to be a broken mannequin, the kind often displayed in department store windows. From a distance, it looked abandoned and lifeless, as though someone had carelessly thrown it away during the night. At first, Betty nearly kept walking. After all, Los Angeles was growing quickly during those years. Empty lots were often filled with trash, discarded furniture, and unwanted objects. Seeing something strange lying in the weeds was not uncommon, but as she glanced again, an uneasy feeling crept over her. Something about the figure did not seem right. It felt disturbingly real. Curious and increasingly unsettled, she stepped closer. Then came the terrifying realization that would shock an entire nation. This was no mannequin. It was the body of a young woman. The sight froze Betty with horror.
It was a human body. The body had been cut in two, perfectly, as if it had been done with surgical precision. The body had been washed.
The quiet morning instantly turned into a nightmare. Police were called immediately, and within minutes, the once silent neighborhood exploded with activity. Sirens screamed through the streets as officers rushed to the scene. Detectives carrying notebooks and cameras quickly surrounded the area, studying every detail. Reporters arrived almost as fast as the police, sensing a story that would soon dominate headlines across America. Crowds gathered behind police barriers, whispering fearfully as rumors spread from one person to another. Nobody could fully understand the brutality of what they were witnessing. Soon, investigators identified the victim as 22-year-old Elizabeth Short, a young woman whose tragic death would soon become world famous. Within hours, newspapers across Los Angeles printed shocking front-page stories about the murder. Within days, the case spread across the entire country. Americans became obsessed with every detail, every rumor, and every possible clue. Then the media gave Elizabeth a haunting nickname that would forever become part of criminal history: the Black Dahlia. The name was unforgettable, mysterious, dark, almost cinematic. And with that name, the murder stopped being just another police investigation. Who is the image behind Black Dahlia? How did the name become so widespread? Let's dive into the details of the woman behind the Black Dahlia name. A life unwritten. Long before her name became tied to one of America's most haunting murder mysteries, Elizabeth Short was simply a young woman trying to escape hardship and build a better life. Behind the famous headlines and dark rumors was a real person filled with hope, disappointment, ambition, and quiet loneliness. Elizabeth was born on July 29, 1924, in Hyde Park, Massachusetts, just outside Boston. Her early years unfolded during the Great Depression, a time when many American families struggled to survive. Jobs disappeared, money became scarce, and uncertainty shaped everyday life. For Elizabeth's family, those struggles became even more painful when her father, Cleo Short, suddenly vanished. It was believed that he had taken his own life, leaving behind his wife and 5 daughters. But the truth was far stranger. Years later, the family discovered he was still alive and had abandoned them completely. The betrayal left deep emotional scars. Elizabeth's mother worked tirelessly to care for the children, but life remained unstable. Those who knew Elizabeth later described her as strikingly beautiful, yet emotionally unsettled. She was known for her charm and elegance, but beneath that was a young woman constantly searching for something more meaningful. She did not want an ordinary life trapped by poverty and disappointment. Like many young women of the 1940s, Elizabeth became enchanted by Hollywood. The glamorous world of film seemed like a doorway into another reality, one filled with fame, luxury, romance, and endless possibilities. California represented freedom. To Elizabeth, it was a place where people could reinvent themselves and leave painful memories behind. She dreamed of becoming an actress, someone admired and remembered. At 19, she traveled to California after learning that her father was alive. She hoped reconnecting with him might finally bring stability into her life. Instead, the reunion quickly turned bitter. After only a short time together, he forced her to leave. Once again, Elizabeth found herself abandoned and alone in a place far from home. Over the next few years, her life became unsettled and unpredictable. She moved frequently across Southern California, drifting between Los Angeles, San Diego, and Santa Barbara. She worked small jobs, often as a waitress, and stayed in inexpensive boarding houses. During the final years of World War II, she spent time with soldiers and servicemen, searching for companionship and security while trying to survive financially. In 1943, Elizabeth was arrested in Santa Barbara for underage drinking. The police photograph taken that day would later become one of the most recognizable images in American crime history. In the picture, she looks directly into the camera with an expression that still fascinates people decades later. Some see sadness in her eyes. Others see defiance, exhaustion, or hidden fear. The image feels deeply personal, almost as though it captured a young woman carrying burdens no one else could fully understand. By the end of 1946, Elizabeth returned to Los Angeles with very little money and no permanent place to stay. Yet, despite everything she had endured, she still believed her life could change at any moment. She still held on to the dream that success, happiness, and recognition were waiting just ahead. Tragically, she never knew how close she was to the end of her story. But who could have committed such a heinous crime? Why was Elizabeth Short the target? Could she have done something that triggered her killer? Let's find out what the final days before the horror looked like. A life cut unsolved. The final days of Elizabeth Short's life remain one of the darkest and most puzzling mysteries in American crime history. Even after decades of investigation, nobody has been able to fully explain where she went, who she met, or what truly happened to her during the last week she was alive. Every clue seemed to raise even more questions. Witnesses gave confusing and often conflicting accounts about her movements. Some people who claim to have seen Elizabeth during those final days described her as relaxed, smiling, and enjoying herself as usual. Others remembered something completely different. They said she appeared tense, distracted, and deeply uneasy, as though she feared someone was following her or watching her every move. Reports placed her in several locations throughout downtown Los Angeles. She was allegedly seen inside busy bars, elegant restaurants, and crowded hotels. One of the last confirmed sightings of Elizabeth occurred on January 9, 1947, at the famous Biltmore Hotel. After that moment, she seemed to disappear without a trace. For almost 6 long days, nobody knew where she was or whether she was even alive. Then came the discovery that horrified the entire nation. On a quiet morning in Leimert Park, a woman walking nearby noticed what she first believed was a discarded mannequin lying in an empty lot. As she moved closer, the terrifying truth became clear. The body belonged to Elizabeth Short. Even experienced investigators were left stunned by what they saw. Many officers later admitted they had never witnessed anything so brutal and disturbing. The crime scene looked carefully arranged, almost theatrical in its presentation. Elizabeth's body had been severed completely in half at the waist with shocking precision. The cuts appeared so clean and exact that detectives immediately suspected the killer had medical experience or advanced knowledge of human anatomy. But the nightmare details continued to grow darker. Her body had been completely drained of blood and washed clean, removing important evidence that investigators desperately needed. Detectives believed the killer had intentionally cleaned the remains before placing them in the vacant lot, almost as if he wanted the body to be discovered quickly and attract maximum attention. Then there was the horrifying injury that became infamous across America. Elizabeth's had been cut from the corners toward her ears, creating the terrifying appearance later described as a Glasgow smile. Newspapers across the country covered the gruesome detail, and the public struggled to understand how anyone could commit such cruelty. The autopsy revealed even more disturbing evidence. Marks on her wrists and ankles suggested she had been tied up for a long period of time. Burn marks hinted at torture. Internal injuries showed signs of prolonged abuse before death. According to the coroner, Elizabeth suffered greatly during her final hours. Investigators quickly realized this was not a random act of violence or a crime committed in sudden anger. Everything about the murder suggested planning, control, patience, and confidence. Whoever killed Elizabeth Short had enough time, privacy, and calmness to carry out an act so horrifying that it would haunt America for generations. How did the mystery become one of the most popular in America's history? What role did the media play in this? Let's delve into the details of how America became obsessed with Black Dahlia. Media frenzy unleashed. The murder of Elizabeth Short did not remain just another crime story for long. Almost overnight, it exploded into one of the biggest media sensations Los Angeles had ever witnessed. The shocking nature of the case gripped the entire city with fear, curiosity, and endless speculation. Newspapers fought fiercely to publish the most dramatic headlines, each trying to outdo the others with darker details and bold claims. Radio stations discussed the murder day and night, turning the case into a constant topic of conversation in homes, restaurants, buses, and workplaces. Crowds gathered around newspaper stands every morning, desperate to learn if the police had finally uncovered the killer's identity. As the story spread, the public became strangely fascinated with Elizabeth herself. The nickname Black Dahlia, believed to have been inspired by the movie The Blue Dahlia, added an eerie Hollywood feeling to the tragedy. The press quickly embraced the name because it sounded mysterious, glamorous, and unforgettable. Soon, Elizabeth was no longer seen simply as a young woman who had lost her life. In the eyes of the public, she became something larger than reality, a haunting mystery, a tragic icon surrounded by rumors and secrets.
Dozens of people falsely confessed to the crime. Yet the case was never solved, and around it, stories, theories, and dark rumors began to grow.
Journalists began digging deeply into every detail of her personal life. They interviewed old friends, neighbors, former co-workers, and anyone who had ever crossed paths with her. Some newspaper stories stretched the truth to make the case appear more dramatic. Others were entirely fabricated. Gossip traveled faster than facts, and many readers could no longer tell the difference between real evidence and sensational fiction. Every new rumor only increased public fascination. Meanwhile, the Los Angeles Police Department launched what became the largest investigation in the city's history at that time. Hundreds of officers were assigned to the case, working long hours in hopes of finding the murderer. Even the Federal Bureau of Investigation stepped in to assist. Because of the disturbing precision of the injuries, investigators questioned surgeons, doctors, and medical experts across Southern California, wondering whether the killer possessed professional medical knowledge. The suspect list expanded rapidly and seemed to include almost every type of person imaginable. Doctors, artists, former lovers, soldiers, wandering drifters, and hardened criminals all came under suspicion. Reports suggested that police files eventually contained more than 150 possible suspects. Yet, instead of bringing investigators closer to the truth, the growing attention created even greater confusion. Then came another serious obstacle: false confessions. Men started entering police stations claiming responsibility for the murder. Others mailed strange letters to newspapers, pretending to be the killer. Some individuals appeared mentally disturbed, while others simply wanted fame and attention from the massive publicity surrounding the case. Detectives spent countless hours chasing false leads and trying to separate truth from fiction. As pressure from the public and the media intensified, the investigation gradually became overwhelmed by chaos, confusion, and critical mistakes. But did the media play a role in compromising the case? Let's dive into the details of how the investigation was ultimately undermined from within. How the investigation was ruined from the inside. Today, when a major crime happens, police officers immediately seal off the area. Investigators wear gloves, protect every object, and carefully document every step they take. Even the smallest clue, a fingerprint, a strand of hair, or a footprint, can help solve a case. Strict rules exist to ensure evidence remains unaltered and reliable in court. But in 1947, things were very different. Forensic science was still developing, and many of the procedures detectives rely on today simply did not exist. In the investigation surrounding the murder of Elizabeth Short, those weaknesses would become one of the greatest disasters in criminal investigation history. One of the most disturbing moments came shortly after newspapers began covering the case heavily. The offices of the Los Angeles Examiner received a chilling package from an unknown sender. Reporters quickly realized the items inside belonged to Elizabeth Short herself. The package contained deeply personal belongings. There were photographs, business cards, her birth certificate, an address book, and several private items that only someone very close to the crime could have possessed. The terrifying implication was obvious. The killer had likely sent the package directly to the newspaper. Instead of treating the contents like critical evidence, newspaper employees opened the package themselves. They passed the items around the office, touched them repeatedly, and examined everything with bare hands. Some of the belongings were even photographed for publication before police were contacted. By the time investigators finally received the package, the damage may already have been irreversible. Any fingerprints left by the killer could have been smeared or destroyed. Tiny forensic traces that modern investigators would carefully protect may have vanished forever.
After her death, certain details of the investigation were quietly buried. Police files were lost, witness statements disappeared, and some suspects were never seriously pursued.
The evidence had already been contaminated before experts ever had the chance to study it properly. And sadly, that was not the only problem damaging the investigation. During that period, Many journalists had unusually close relationships with officers inside the Los Angeles Police Department. Information leaked constantly to the press. Sensitive details about the crime often appeared in newspapers before detectives had even finished analyzing them. Witness identities became public knowledge. Rumors spread rapidly across the city, speculation mixed with actual evidence. Every day brought new headlines, theories, and sensational stories. The investigation slowly transformed from a murder case into a public spectacle. The pressure from the media created chaos. Detectives were overwhelmed by false tips, misleading confessions, and endless public attention. Important leads became buried beneath confusion and sensationalism. Instead of helping the investigation, the constant publicity often made the search for the killer even harder. Years later, the handling of the case faced serious criticism. A Los Angeles County grand jury openly condemned the LAPD's investigation, citing major failures, poor management, and investigative errors that may have permanently damaged the case. Yet, despite the criticism, no officer faced meaningful punishment. And while the errors, leaks, and mishandling became part of history, one haunting fact remained unchanged. The person who murdered Elizabeth Short was never officially identified, and the mystery of the Black Dahlia case continued to haunt America for generations. So, whose name seems to top the list of suspects? Why wasn't he arrested? Let's dig into the details of Dr. George Hodell and the dark secrets of the Soden house. Dr. George Hodell. Among the many suspects tied to the shocking murder of Elizabeth Short, one man has continued to attract more suspicion and fascination than anyone else: George Hill Hodell. Even decades later, his name still appears at the center of debates surrounding the famous Black Dahlia mystery. At first glance, George Hodell seemed like the picture of intelligence and success. Reports from his early years claimed he was a child genius with an extraordinary mind. As he grew older, he became a doctor specializing in sexually transmitted diseases, a career that brought him into contact with all kinds of people: wealthy businessmen, Hollywood personalities, artists, and people connected to the darker side of Los Angeles society all crossed paths with him. Hodell lived among creative and influential circles. He was connected to photographers, intellectuals, and people who moved through glamorous Hollywood parties. On the surface, he appeared cultured, sophisticated, and highly respected. But behind that polished image, unsettling stories slowly began to spread. People who knew him often described him as manipulative, mysterious, and deeply secretive. Rumors about his private life painted a disturbing picture. Then, matters became even darker when shocking allegations emerged involving the sexual abuse of his own daughter. Although he was later acquitted in court, the accusations left a lasting stain on his reputation and increased police suspicion toward him. The Los Angeles Police Department became so suspicious of Hodell that investigators took an extraordinary step for the late 1940s. They secretly bugged his home with listening devices. At the time, electronic surveillance like this was rare and highly unusual, showing just how seriously detectives viewed him as a possible suspect. The home they monitored only added to the eerie atmosphere surrounding the case. Hodell lived in the strange and haunting Soden house, a mansion with a design that resembled an ancient Mayan temple hidden in the hills of Hollywood. Its dark appearance later fueled endless speculation and fear. As detectives listened to conversations inside the house, they collected recordings that would later become highly controversial. Some researchers believed certain statements made by Hodell sounded dangerously close to admissions of guilt. Others argued the recordings were unclear and could not be treated as proof of anything. Still, one fact remained impossible to dismiss. Years after Elizabeth Short's murder, police continued to view George Hodell as suspicious enough to keep under secret surveillance. Yet despite all the rumors, accusations, and investigations, he was never arrested for the crime. Then, just as the mystery deepened, Hodell suddenly left the United States and moved to the Philippines, where he spent several years abroad. With his departure, the investigation once again lost momentum, and the Black Dahlia case drifted further into uncertainty and legend. Before the most recent use of AI to solve the mystery, what was previously the clearest discovery? let's talk about Steve Hodell's decades-long pursuit of the Black Dahlia mystery. A son's discovery. For more than 2 decades, retired homicide detective Steve Hodell devoted his life to investigating one of America's most haunting unsolved crimes, the 1947 murder of Elizabeth Short, famously known as the Black Dahlia case.
Steve Hodell believes his father was the culprit. He joins us now from Los Angeles. Steve, thank you for your time this morning. You've written 5 books on this case.
According to Hodell, the shocking murder was not committed by a random killer, but by his own father, Dr. George Hodell, a wealthy Los Angeles physician with a dark and secretive past. Hodell's investigation began after he discovered old family photographs that he believed resembled Elizabeth Short. That discovery pushed him into a years-long search through police archives, witness accounts, surveillance records, and personal family history. Over time, he claimed to uncover disturbing evidence linking his father to the brutal killing. Among the most striking pieces of evidence, according to Steve Hodell, were old LAPD surveillance transcripts from the late 1940s. Investigators at the time had secretly bugged George Hodell's home because he was already under suspicion in another serious case. In those recordings, Steve claims his father made cryptic statements implying knowledge of the murder. One alleged line suggested that even if he had killed the Black Dahlia, authorities could never prove it. Steve Hodell also pointed to his father's medical background, arguing that the precise mutilation of Elizabeth Short's body reflected surgical skill and anatomical knowledge. He spent years comparing crime scene details with his father's lifestyle, social circle, and psychological profile. Though many investigators and historians remain divided over his conclusions, Steve Hodell's relentless investigation transformed public discussion surrounding the Black Dahlia mystery. His books, interviews, and research revived global interest in the case and kept alive the possibility that one of America's most infamous murders may have been far closer to home than anyone imagined. So, what do you think about the latest discovery on the Black Dahlia mystery? Do you think this truly puts the mystery to rest? We'd love to hear your opinions in the comments below. And don't forget to like and subscribe.